She walked into the darkness with her saxophone case in hand, still humming the melody from the dance hall. He was waiting by the car, smiling, ready to drive her home. It was Easter Sunday, 1946. The war was over. The world was supposed to be safe again. But in Texarkana, something had already awakened. Something that moved through the shadows like smoke. Something that would take 5 lives in 10 weeks and then vanish into legend, leaving behind only questions, terror, and a town that would never feel safe after sundown again. This is a true story. And tonight, we're opening the file on America's Phantom. If cases like this keep you awake at night, if you're drawn to the mysteries that history couldn't solve, then you're in the right place. We're working toward 100 subscribers here at the Midnight File, and every single one of you matters. And before we step into the darkness of 1946, do me a favor. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. London? Los Angeles? São Paulo? Tokyo? I want to know how far these files travel. How many corners of the world are listening when the lights go out? Comment your city, your country. Let's see how far the truth can reach. Now I'm going to ask you for something small but meaningful. If this video resonates with you, if it makes you feel something, leave a like. We're aiming for just 20 likes on this one. 20 people who felt something. 20 people who believe stories like this deserve to be remembered. It's a small gesture, but it tells me you're here. You're listening and you care. So go ahead, hit that like button. And let's begin. The year is 1946. The world is exhaling. World War II ended less than a year ago, and America is stitching itself back together. Soldiers are returning home. Factories are retooling from tanks to automobiles. Swing music is playing on radios, and young couples are dancing again, falling in love again, dreaming again. The darkness of global conflict is fading. People are ready to believe in safety, in normalcy, in a future that doesn't reek of gunpowder and grief. Texarkana sits on the border between Arkansas and Texas, a town split down the middle by a state line. If you stand on State Line Avenue, you can have 1 foot in each state. It's a quiet place, the kind of town where everybody knows everybody, where church on Sunday is a given, where farmers sell cotton and merchants sell dry goods, and life moves at the pace it's always moved. About 30,000 people call this area home. It's not big enough to feel anonymous, not small enough to feel claustrophobic. It's just right, at least it was. But in the early months of 1946, something shifts. The air becomes heavier, the nights feel longer, and the darkness that wraps around Texarkana after sunset begins to carry a different weight, a presence, a threat, a whisper that something is out there, watching, waiting. February 22nd, 1946. A Friday night. The kind of night when young couples drive out to the quiet roads beyond the city limits, park under the stars, and steal a few moments of privacy. These places are called lovers' lanes, and they exist in every American town, secluded, romantic, safe, or so they thought. Jimmy Hollis is 25 years old. Mary Jane Larry is 19. They've driven out to one of those quiet spots just outside Texarkana, a place where the trees grow thick and the road turns to gravel, and the only sounds are crickets and the occasional rustle of wind through the pines. They're sitting in Jimmy's car, talking, laughing, enjoying the kind of freedom that comes with being young in a country that's finally at peace. Then the light hits them, a flashlight beam, harsh and blinding, cutting through the windshield like a blade. Jimmy squints, raises a hand to shield his eyes. Before he can react, there's a figure at the driver's side window, a man, tall, silent, and his face is covered by a white hood, crude and terrifying, with rough holes cut out for the eyes. It looks like something pulled from a nightmare, a spectre made flesh. The man is holding a gun. His voice is calm, cold, emotionless. He orders them out of the car. Jimmy's heart is pounding, but he complies. What else can he do? Mary is trembling beside him. They step out into the night air, and the man with the hood motions with the pistol. "Walk," he says. "Move." Jimmy tries to speak, tries to reason with him, asks what he wants. The answer comes not in words, but in violence. The man swings the pistol like a club, smashing it into the side of Jimmy's head. The sound is sickening, metal meeting bone. Jimmy drops, his skull fractured in 2 places, blood pouring from the wounds. He's unconscious, crumpled on the ground like a discarded coat. Mary screams. The man turns to her. He tells her to run into the woods. She obeys, stumbling through the underbrush. Branches tearing at her clothes, roots catching her feet. She can hear him behind her, steady, unhurried. When he catches her, he doesn't speak. He doesn't explain. He simply attacks. The pistol comes down again and again, striking her head, her shoulders, her arms. And then, in an act of cruelty that defies comprehension, he assaults her with the weapon itself, violating her in a way that no words can adequately convey. I'll spare you the explicit details here, not because they aren't part of the truth, but because some horrors don't need to be described in full to be understood. What matters is this. Mary Jean Larey endured something unimaginable that night, and she survived it. She survives because headlights appear on the road. Another car, approaching slowly. The man in the hood sees the lights, freezes for a moment, then retreats into the darkness. He vanishes as quickly as he appeared, swallowed by the trees and the night. Mary runs. Barefoot, bleeding, traumatized, she runs until she finds a house with lights in the windows. She pounds on the door, and when it opens, she collapses into the arms of strangers, gasping, sobbing, telling them what happened. They call the police, they call an ambulance. And when the authorities arrive at the scene, they find Jimmy Hollis still alive, barely, lying in a spreading pool of his own blood. Both of them survive. But survival, in this case, is a complicated word. Jimmy Hollis spends weeks in the hospital. His skull is fractured. His memory is fragmented. Mary Jean Larey is physically injured but emotionally shattered. The question that haunts both of them, that haunts the investigators, that haunts the entire town, is simple and terrible. Why? Who was that man? What did he want? And will he come back? The police have no answers. The description is vague. A tall man, a white hood, a gun. No fingerprints. No witnesses beyond the victims themselves. The case is disturbing, brutal, but isolated. At least that's what they tell themselves. This is an anomaly, a random act of violence. It won't happen again. But it does. 32 days pass. 32 days during which life in Texarkana continues, oblivious, ordinary. Then March 24th, 1946 arrives. It's a Sunday, and on a remote road in Bowie County, Texas, 2 young people are about to become the first confirmed fatalities of the Phantom. Richard Griffin is 29 years old, a Navy veteran who served his country during the war and came home to build a life. Polly Ann Moore is just 17, a high school student with her whole future ahead of her. They're out driving together, parked on a secluded road, sharing one of those quiet moments that young couples treasure. They have no idea they're being watched. When their bodies are discovered the next morning, the scene is one of calculated horror. Both have been shot in the back of the head with a .32 caliber Colt automatic pistol, execution style. Richard's pockets are turned inside out, the contents spilled onto the car seat. Was this a robbery, or was the scene staged to look like one? The investigators can't be sure. Polly Ann's body tells a darker story. She was removed from the vehicle. A blanket was spread on the ground nearby. She was assaulted, violated, and then returned to the car to be slain beside Richard. The details are clinical when read in a police report, but the reality is something else entirely. This was not a crime of passion. This was methodical, controlled, planned. The police recover a single .32 caliber shell casing from the scene. It's a small piece of evidence, but it will become crucial later. Ballistics experts examine it, catalog it, file it away. But there's no database to check it against. No national registry of firearms, no way to trace the weapon back to its owner. The shell casing is a clue that leads nowhere. When the news breaks, Texarkana reacts with shock, but not yet panic. 2 people have been taken. It's horrific, unthinkable, but it's still possible to believe this was a singular event. An outlier. The town grieves for Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore, buries them, and tries to move forward. But deep down, in the quiet hours of the night, people are starting to wonder, starting to remember the attack on Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larey 5 weeks earlier, starting to see a pattern where they didn't want to see one. And then, 3 weeks later, the pattern becomes undeniable. April 14th, 1946. Easter Sunday. The holiest day in the Christian calendar, a day of resurrection and hope and renewal. Paul Martin is 17 years old, a young man with his entire life stretching out before him. Betty Jo Booker is just 15, a talented musician who plays the saxophone with a skill and passion that makes everyone who hears her smile. On this particular night, she's performed at a VFW club dance, filling the hall with music, and when the evening winds down, Paul offers to drive her home. She accepts. They leave together. Driving into the warm Arkansas night, they never make it home. At 6:30 the next morning, a farmer driving along North Park Road notices something unusual, a body lying in the grass near the roadside. He stops, approaches, and realizes with dawning horror that it's a young man, and he's been shot multiple times. The farmer runs to the nearest house and calls the police. When the authorities arrive, they identify the body as Paul Martin. He's been shot 4 times, once through his right hand as if he raised it to shield himself, once through his shoulder, once through the back of his neck, and once through his face. The pattern tells a story. Paul Martin tried to run, he tried to escape, and the person pursuing him hunted him down, methodical and merciless, and ended his life with a final shot to ensure he wouldn't survive. But where is Betty Jo? The search begins immediately. Officers fan out across the area, calling her name, combing through fields and woods and ditches, nearly 2 miles from where Paul's body was found, behind a tree on a patch of isolated ground. They discover her. She's fully clothed, lying on her back, her hand tucked into the pocket of her overcoat. At first glance, it might look like she simply lay down to rest, but the illusion shatters the moment they see the wounds. She's been shot twice. And when the medical examiner conducts the autopsy, the full horror emerges. Betty Jo Booker was assaulted before she was taken, tortured. Her final hours were a living nightmare that no 15-year-old, no human being should ever endure. Her saxophone is missing. The police search the area but find no trace of it. Months later, in October 1946, someone will stumble across it near the crime scene, abandoned, silent. But in April, as investigators stand over Betty Jo's body, the missing instrument feels like a taunt. The individual who did this took something from her, something beyond her life. Something symbolic, personal. The way her body is positioned, hand in pocket, arranged just so, suggests staging. The person who placed her there wanted her found this way, wanted the scene to communicate something. But what? Investigators will debate this for decades. Is it a signature, a message, or simply the compulsion of a disturbed mind that needs to impose order on chaos? What they know for certain is this: the same .32 caliber Colt automatic pistol that ended the lives of Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore has now claimed 2 more victims. The ballistics match is conclusive. They're dealing with the same individual, and he's escalating. If you're still with me, if this story is gripping you the way it's gripping me, take a moment and share this video with someone who loves true crime, who loves unsolved mysteries, who understands that the past still has lessons to teach us. Send it to a friend. Post it on your social media. Let's get this story in front of as many people as possible. These victims deserve to be remembered, and maybe, just maybe, someone out there knows something. Someone has a piece of the puzzle that could finally bring answers. So share this, spread the word. Let's see how far the truth can travel. Now, Texarkana is no longer in shock. Texarkana is in terror. 4 people have been taken in less than 2 months. 2 more have been attacked and survived. The pattern is clear, the threat is real, and no one knows where or when the individual will strike next. The town that had been rebuilding after the war, that had been dreaming of peace and prosperity, is now a community under siege. Gun sales explode overnight. Hardware stores across Texarkana sell out of firearms within hours of the news breaking about Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker. Ammunition disappears from shelves. Locks, deadbolts, chains, anything that might keep a door closed, a window secured, a family safe, flies off the racks. People who have never owned a weapon in their lives are now sleeping with pistols on their nightstands and shotguns propped beside their beds. A voluntary curfew takes hold before any official mandate is issued. As the sun begins to set each evening, the streets of Texarkana empty. Shops close early. Restaurants shutter their windows. Dance halls cancel events. The VFW club, where Betty Jo Booker played her saxophone just days earlier, goes dark and silent. Couples stop going out. Teenagers stop cruising the back roads. Lovers' lanes, once the domain of innocent romance, become forbidden territory. Farmers and homeowners sit on their porches through the night, rifles across their laps, watching the tree lines, listening to the rustle of wind and wondering if that shadow is just a branch or something worse. Neighborhood patrols form, groups of armed men walking the streets in shifts, trying to protect their families, their neighbors, their town. It's vigilante justice waiting to happen, and the police know it. They urge calm, urge people to let law enforcement handle the situation, but the fear is too deep. People need to feel like they're doing something, anything, to keep the darkness at bay. Radio broadcasts shift in tone. Between weather reports and swing music, announcers read the names of the victims: Richard Griffin, Polly Ann Moore, Paul Martin, Betty Jo Booker. They remind listeners to lock their doors, to stay inside after dark, to report anything suspicious. Ministers stand in pulpits and speak of vigilance, of prayer, of trusting in God's protection, while also acknowledging that evil walks among them. The term phantom begins to circulate. At first, it's just a whisper, a nickname born from fear and frustration. The phantom, the figure in the white hood who appears out of nowhere, strikes without warning, and vanishes back into the night like smoke. The press picks up the term, and soon it's everywhere. The Phantom of Texarkana, the Phantom Slayer, the phantom who haunts lovers' lanes and leaves nothing behind but bodies and terror. Parents forbid their children from going out after dark. High schools cancel evening activities. Even daylight feels unsafe now, because everyone knows that nightfall is coming, and when it does, the phantom might return. The psychological weight of living under this kind of threat is crushing. People stop sleeping well. They jump at every sound. They look at their neighbors with suspicion. Could it be him? Could it be someone we know? This is what terror does to a community. It fractures trust. It isolates people. It turns a town into a collection of frightened individuals barricaded in their homes, waiting for the next headline, the next body, the next proof that the nightmare isn't over. And then, on May 3rd, 1946, the phantom strikes again. But this time, everything is different. Virgil Starks is 37 years old, a farmer living with his wife Katie in an isolated farmhouse northeast of Texarkana. It's a Friday evening, and Virgil is doing what he does most nights, sitting in his armchair by the window, reading the newspaper, unwinding after a long day of work. Katie is moving through the house, tending to chores, thinking about supper, thinking about nothing in particular. Outside, the sun is setting, painting the fields in gold and shadow. Virgil never hears the gunshot. He never sees it coming. 2 bullets shatter the window and punch through the back of his head, and he's gone, just like that. No warning, no chance to fight or flee or even understand what's happening. One moment he's reading about the world, and the next moment he's no longer in it. Katie hears the shots. She hears the glass breaking. She rushes into the room and sees her husband slumped in his chair, blood pooling beneath him, and she knows immediately that he's gone. But before she can scream, before she can run, 2 more shots ring out. Both bullets hit her in the face. One passes through her mouth, dislodging a tooth, exiting through her cheek. The other strikes her jaw. The pain is unimaginable, blinding. But Katie Starks does not die. She does not fall. She runs. Barefoot, bleeding, her face shattered, Katie flees the farmhouse. She leaves a trail of blood across the yard, down the driveway, onto the road. She stumbles to a neighbor's house and collapses on their doorstep, gasping, barely able to speak. When they open the door and see her, they scream. Her face is a mask of blood. But through the agony, she manages to get the words out. Virgil's gone. Virgil's been taken. Help. The neighbors call the police. They call an ambulance. And when the authorities arrive at the Starks farmhouse, they find Virgil exactly where Katie described him, slumped in his chair, the newspaper still in his lap, the window shattered, shell casings on the ground outside. But here's where everything changes. The weapon used to end Virgil Stark's life is a .22 caliber pistol, not the .32 that was used in the previous 3 incidents. The location is different, a farmhouse, not a secluded road. The victim is different, a middle-aged man, not a young couple. The method is different, shooting through a window from outside, not confronting victims face to face. So the question that investigators immediately begin asking is, did the Phantom do this? Or is this someone else entirely? Katie Starks survives. Miraculously, impossibly, despite being shot twice in the face at close range, she survives. She spends weeks in the hospital. Her recovery is long and painful, but she lives. And when she's able to speak, when the swelling subsides enough for her to form words, the police ask her if she saw anything. Did she see the person who did this? Did she recognize them? Katie says no. She didn't see anyone. The shots came through the window. By the time she realized what was happening, the individual was already gone. But in the years that follow, rumors begin to circulate. Whispers that Katie knows more than she's saying. Whispers that the attack on the Starks farmhouse wasn't the work of the Phantom at all, but something more personal. Some locals will claim, decades later, that Katie had been involved in an extramarital relationship, and that Virgil's demise was the result of jealousy, revenge, a personal vendetta. They'll point to the different weapon, the different location, the different method as proof that this was a separate crime, unconnected to the others. But the police in 1946 don't see it that way. As far as they're concerned, this is the Phantom's 4th attack. The inconsistencies are troubling, yes, but the timing fits, the brutality fits, the randomness fits. And so the Stark shooting is added to the file, another entry in the growing list of horrors that the Phantom has inflicted on Texarkana. What no one knows at the time is that this will be the last attack. After May 3, 1946, the Phantom never strikes again. The 10-week reign of terror ends as abruptly as it began. But the questions, the fear, the scars, those will linger for decades. The investigation into the Texarkana attacks becomes one of the largest law enforcement operations in the history of the American South. This isn't just a local police matter anymore. This is a multi-state, multi-agency manhunt involving resources and personnel that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. Sheriff Bill Presley of Bowie County, Texas, takes the lead on the Texas side of the investigation. Sheriff Tillman Johnson coordinates efforts in Miller County, Arkansas. The Texas Rangers, legendary for their skill and their ruthlessness, send their top investigators. Among them is Captain Manuel Lone Wolf Gonzalez, a man whose reputation precedes him. Gonzalez is a living legend, a lawman who has hunted bootleggers, bank robbers and armed insurrectionists across the Southwest. He's fearless, relentless, and he brings with him the full weight of the Rangers' authority. The Arkansas State Police dispatch their own team, including Detective Max Tackett, a sharp, methodical investigator who will spend the rest of his life convinced he knows who the Phantom is. 20 additional state troopers are sent to Texarkana to bolster local law enforcement, to patrol the roads, to provide a visible presence that might deter further attacks. The FBI becomes involved as well, sending forensic specialists to analyze ballistics, fingerprints, and physical evidence. This is a coordinated, comprehensive effort involving some of the best law enforcement minds in the country. And yet, despite all this talent, all these resources, all this determination, the investigation runs into walls at every turn. Fingerprints are lifted from the crime scenes. Latent prints, partial prints, smudges on car doors and windows and steering wheels. They're carefully catalogued, photographed, sent to the FBI's growing database in Washington, D.C. But none of them match any known offenders. Whoever the Phantom is, he's not in the system. He's never been arrested, never been fingerprinted, never left a trace in the criminal record. Ballistics evidence confirms that the same .32 caliber Colt automatic pistol was used in 3 of the 4 attacks. The shell casings match. The bullet striations match. It's the same weapon, no question, but the weapon itself is never found. Investigators search the areas around the crime scenes, dragging ponds, combing through fields, checking pawn shops and gun dealers across the region. Nothing. The .32 Colt has vanished as completely as the person who wielded it. eyewitness descriptions are frustratingly vague. Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larey, the survivors of the first attack, describe a tall man in a white hood with a gun. But the hood obscured his face completely. Was he young or old, clean-shaven or bearded? They can't say. The darkness, the trauma, the sheer terror of the moment. It all conspires to erase the details that might have helped identify him. The police conduct interviews across Texarkana and the surrounding counties. They talk to hundreds of people. They follow up on tips, rumors, suspicions. Someone saw a stranger in town. Someone heard a car speeding away from the area near one of the crime scenes. Someone's neighbor has been acting strangely. Every lead is pursued, every name is checked, and every single one leads to a dead end. The problem is that Texarkana in 1946 is a transient place. The war has just ended. Soldiers are coming home, passing through, looking for work, drifting from town to town. Strangers are everywhere, and any one of them could be the phantom. The sheer number of possibilities is overwhelming. The investigators are drinking from a fire hose, trying to process an avalanche of information, and none of it is cohering into anything useful. Frustration mounts. The public is demanding answers. The press is demanding answers. The families of the victims are demanding answers, and the police have nothing to give them except promises that they're doing everything they can, that they won't stop until the phantom is caught. But privately, the investigators are beginning to worry that they're chasing a ghost. Then, in mid-1946, a break. Or at least, what appears to be a break. Youell Swinney is 29 years old, a career criminal with a record that reads like a catalogue of American petty crime. Car theft, burglary, counterfeiting. He's been in and out of jail for years, a habitual offender who can't seem to stay on the right side of the law. In the summer of 1946, he's living in Texarkana, scraping by, operating on the margins of society the way he's always done. The police become aware of Swinney through a routine investigation into stolen vehicles. He's been driving cars that don't belong to him, flipping them for quick cash, moving from one hustle to the next. That's not unusual behavior for Swinney. It's what he does. But when the police start looking into him more closely, they notice something interesting. The timeline of his movements, his history of violence, his presence in Texarkana during the period of the attacks, it all starts to line up in a way that makes the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. And then they talk to his wife. Peggy Lois Stevens Swinney is a young woman, trapped in a marriage that's more prison than partnership. Youell is controlling, volatile, dangerous. She's terrified of him. And when the police approach her, when they start asking questions about where Youell was on certain nights, what he was doing, whether she knows anything about the attacks, Peggy breaks. She confesses. She tells the police that she was with Youell on the night that Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker were taken. She says he drove them out to the park, that he left the car with a gun, that she waited in the vehicle while he was gone, that he came back later with blood on his clothes and a wild look in his eyes. She says he told her to keep her mouth shut, that if she ever said anything, he'd end her too. The investigators are stunned. This is the break they've been waiting for. Peggy provides details that only someone who was there, someone who witnessed the crime, could possibly know. She tells them about items Youell took from the victims. She tells them where he disposed of them, and when the police search those locations, they find exactly what she described. Paul Martin's datebook, tossed into the bushes near the crime scene. Other personal effects hidden in places only the perpetrator would know about. It's damning. It's compelling. It's the kind of evidence that should lead directly to an arrest, a trial, a conviction. But there's a problem. Actually, there are several problems. First, Peggy's story changes. Not dramatically, but enough to raise questions. In one interview, she says she was in the car the whole time. In another, she suggests she might have gotten out briefly. She describes Youell's clothing differently in different tellings. The details blur and shift, and the investigators start to wonder if she's withholding information, if she's more involved than she's letting on, if fear and trauma are distorting her memory. Second, when it comes time to make the confession official, to put it on the record in a way that can be used in court, Peggy recants. She says she made it all up. She says she was scared, confused, that the police pressured her. She refuses to testify against Youell, and under the spousal privilege laws of the 1940s, The law is clear. A wife cannot be compelled to testify against her husband. Without Peggy's testimony, without her standing in front of a jury and repeating what she told the police, the case falls apart. The prosecutors look at what they have. Circumstantial evidence, a recanted confession. No physical evidence directly linking Youell Swinney to the crime scenes. No fingerprints. No weapon. No witnesses beyond a wife who has now refused to cooperate. They make the calculation that every prosecutor has to make. Can we win this? And the answer is no. They can't. Not beyond a reasonable doubt. Not in a way that would satisfy a jury. So, Youell Swinney is never charged with the Texarkana attacks. But he doesn't go free. The authorities find other charges to bring against him. Car theft. Counterfeiting. Because of his long criminal record, because he's a habitual offender, he's sentenced to life in prison. Not for the attacks, but for everything else. It's a way of taking him off the streets, of ensuring that if he is the Phantom, he'll never have the chance to strike again. Youell Swinney serves his sentence. He spends decades behind bars. In 1973, he's released on parole. An old man by then, broken by years of incarceration. He lives quietly in Dallas, far from Texarkana, far from the memories. In 1994, he passes away in a nursing home, never having been formally accused, never having faced trial, never having answered for the crimes that so many people believe he committed. Max Tackett, the Arkansas State Police detective who interviewed Peggy Swinney, who followed the leads, who built the case against Youell, remains convinced until the day he dies that Swinney was the Phantom. Sheriff Tillman Johnson, who coordinated the investigation on the Arkansas side, feels the same way. They believe they had the right man. They believe justice was denied not by a lack of evidence, but by the legal technicalities of the time, by a wife too terrified to testify, by a system that couldn't quite reach the truth. In 2014, decades after the events, Dr. James Presley publishes a comprehensive book titled The Phantom of Texarkana, Unlocking the Mystery of the Texarkana Serial Murders. Dr. Presley is the nephew of Sheriff William Presley, one of the lead investigators on the case. He's had access to files, interviews, and evidence that few others have seen. And his conclusion, after years of research, is unequivocal. Youell Swinney was the Phantom. The book lays out the case in meticulous detail, connecting the dots, explaining the timeline, addressing the inconsistencies. It's a compelling argument. Many people who read it come away convinced. But not everyone agrees. Because there's another name in this story, another confession, another possibility that refuses to be dismissed. H.B. Doodie Tennison is 18 years old in 1948, a student at the University of Arkansas, tall, over 6 feet, bright, promising. He comes from a respectable family. He has no criminal record. On the surface, he's the kind of young man who should have a long, successful life ahead of him. But on November 4th, 1948, Doodie Tennison takes his own life. He ingests mercury cyanide, a horrific way to go, painful and irreversible. When his body is discovered, authorities find a suicide note among his belongings, and inside a ballpoint fountain pen casing, they find something else, a confession. The note, dated between October 30th and November 4th, 1948, reads, "Why did I take my own life? Well, when you committed 2 double murders, you would too. Yes, I did end Betty Jo Booker and Paul Martin in the city park that night, and end Mr. Stark and try to get Mrs. Stark. It's chilling, it's specific. It names victims. It describes crimes. And for a moment it seems like the mystery has been solved, that the Phantom has finally been unmasked, that the truth has emerged from the shadows. But then investigators find another note. This one reads, "Please disregard all other messages which I have written as possible reasons for taking my own life." So which is it? Was the confession real? Or was it a fabrication? A final act of confusion from a troubled mind? The Texarkana Gazette publishes the second note under the headline "Note Cancelling Admission," and suddenly the confession is cast in doubt. Adding to the confusion is the fact that Tennison's mother and the publisher of the Gazette are close friends. Did the publisher suppress the confession to protect the family? Or was he simply reporting the facts as he understood them? Sheriff Bruce Crider of Washington County investigates Tennison's passing and the notes. He's skeptical from the start. He discovers that the fountain pen used to write the confession was purchased only days before the note was written, suggesting it was a recent decision, not a long-held secret. He interviews witnesses who claim that Tennison had an alibi for the night of the Starks attack. James Freeman, a friend of Tennison's, says they were together that evening, playing cards or checkers at the Tennison home. If Freeman is telling the truth, then Tennison couldn't have been the individual who shot Virgil and Katie Starks. But Freeman himself becomes a person of interest. He's known to local police. Family members and neighbors report that he uses substances and exhibits inappropriate hypersexual behavior toward women. After his mother passes in 1973, Freeman takes his own life as well, leaving behind more questions than answers. So where does that leave us? 2 suspects, 2 confessions, 1 recanted and 1 contradicted. No physical evidence definitively linking either man to the crimes. No weapon, no fingerprints, no closure. Dozens of other suspects are arrested and questioned over the years. Some confess, seeking attention or notoriety, only to be ruled out when their alibis are verified or their stories fall apart under scrutiny. One man, Eddie Ledoux, confesses during interrogation after being arrested for driving a stolen car. He claims he's the Phantom, that he's responsible for all of it. But investigators quickly determine he's lying, that he's simply trying to make a name for himself. His alibis for multiple attacks are ironclad. He's released. The police try everything. They administer sodium pentothal, so-called truth serum, to Youell Swinney during one interrogation. They give him so much of the substance that he loses consciousness instead of confessing. It's a desperate measure, an indication of just how frustrated the investigators have become. And then, after May 3rd, 1946, the attacks stop. Just stop. No more victims, no more bodies, no more terror. The Phantom, whoever he is, vanishes. Did he pass? Did he move away? Was he imprisoned for other crimes? Did he simply decide to stop, to walk away from the violence and disappear back into ordinary life? No one knows. By the fall of 1946, the investigation begins to wind down. Officers are reassigned. The Texas Rangers and FBI agents return to their other duties. The case remains open technically, but it's no longer active. The files sit in cabinets, gathering dust, waiting for a break that never comes. Texarkana begins to heal. Slowly, tentatively, life returns to something resembling normal. People start going out again. Couples start parking on lovers' lanes again. The dance halls reopen, but the scars remain. The memory of those 10 weeks in 1946 never fades. Parents tell their children about the Phantom. Grandparents tell their grandchildren. The story becomes part of the town's identity, a dark thread woven into its history. In 1976, 30 years after the attacks, a filmmaker named Charles B. Pierce releases a movie called The Town That Dreaded Sundown. It's based on the Texarkana incidents, though Pierce takes considerable creative liberties. He invents scenes, dramatizes events, adds details that never happened. The iconic image of a hooded figure that appears in the film, a burlap sack with rough eye holes, becomes seared into popular culture. Some film historians suggest that this image influenced the design of Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th Part 2. True or not, the Phantom of Texarkana becomes a cultural icon, a symbol of faceless, inexplicable terror. In 2014, a meta-sequel is released, also titled The Town That Dreaded Sundown. This film explores the way the original incidents and the 1976 movie have shaped the town's identity, the way legend and reality have become intertwined. The Phantom is no longer just a person. He's a ghost, a myth, a story told to keep the memory alive and to warn future generations. But what's the truth? Who was the Phantom? After nearly 80 years, can we say with any certainty? The evidence points most strongly toward Youell Swinney. His wife's confession, the items recovered from locations she identified, his criminal history, his presence in Texarkana during the attacks, it all lines up. Max Tackett and Tillman Johnson, 2 experienced investigators who worked the case firsthand, believed he was guilty. Dr. James Presley's exhaustive research supports that conclusion. If you put the case before a jury today, with all the evidence laid out, many would likely convict Swinney. But the doubts linger. Peggy Swinney recanted. Her testimony was inconsistent. There's no physical evidence, no fingerprints, no weapon, no DNA, directly tying Swinney to the scenes. And then there's the Starks attack, which doesn't quite fit the pattern. Different weapon, different location, different victim profile. Was that the phantom, or was it someone else? And what about Doodie Tennison? His confession was specific, naming victims, describing crimes. But he also wrote a note contradicting it. His alibi, if true, rules him out of at least one attack. Was he telling the truth? Was he seeking attention? Was he mentally unwell, confessing to crimes he didn't commit in a final desperate act? The truth is, we don't know. We may never know. The Phantom of Texarkana remains one of America's most enduring unsolved mysteries, a case that predates the term serial offender by 3 decades, but exhibits all the hallmarks that would later define such investigations. Random victim selection, a masked perpetrator, crossing state lines to evade jurisdiction, a pattern of violence and violation, and a community paralyzed by fear. What we do know is this: 5 people lost their lives. Jimmy Hollis, Mary Jean Larey, and Katie Starks survived but were forever changed. Texarkana was traumatized in a way that the town has never fully recovered from. And somewhere, whether he was Youell Swinney or Doodie Tennison or someone else entirely, the Phantom lived out his days, carrying his secrets to the grave. If this story has affected you, if it's made you think about justice, about memory, about the victims who never got answers, then do something with that feeling. Subscribe to this channel. Help us reach more people. Help us keep these stories alive. Because as long as we remember, as long as we ask questions, as long as we refuse to let these cases disappear into the silence, there's hope. Maybe not for justice, maybe not for closure, but for remembrance, for honoring the lives that were taken and the pain that was inflicted. And leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Do you believe Youell Swinney was the Phantom? Do you think Doodie Tennison's confession was real? Or is there another theory, another possibility that we haven't considered? Let's talk about it. Let's keep the conversation going. Because that's how we get closer to the truth. By asking questions, by sharing ideas, by refusing to accept that some mysteries are meant to stay buried. The Phantom of Texarkana. A name that still sends a chill through anyone who knows the story. A case that has haunted investigators, researchers, filmmakers, and true crime enthusiasts for nearly 8 decades. A reminder that sometimes the darkness wins. Sometimes evil walks among us and then simply disappears, leaving behind only questions and grief and the faint, lingering sense that we were never as safe as we thought we were. But here's the thing about stories like this: they don't end. They echo through time. They shape the way we think about safety, about justice, about the fragility of the lives we've built. Texarkana still remembers. The families of the victims still remember, and now you remember too. So the next time the sun sets and the shadows grow long, the next time you're driving down a quiet road and the trees close in around you, the next time you hear a sound in the night that you can't quite place, remember Texarkana. Remember the 10 weeks in 1946 when the Phantom walked among them. Remember that some mysteries are never solved. Some ghosts never leave. And if that thought keeps you awake tonight, if you find yourself staring at the ceiling replaying the details, wondering what really happened on those dark roads so many years ago, well, that's exactly why we do this. That's why the Midnight File exists. To tell the stories that refuse to be forgotten, to honor the victims who never got justice, to ask the questions that still demand answers. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And if this case has gripped you the way it's gripped me, share it, talk about it, keep it alive. Because as long as we're telling these stories, as long as we're asking these questions, the victims are never truly forgotten. Until next time, this is Julian Cross reminding you that some files are never closed, some cases are never solved, and some nights when the moon is full and the world is quiet, the Phantom still walks. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and I'll see you in the next file.